The main reason people will leave their jobs, irrespective of their age or experience, will come down to their relationship with their boss. Okay. And the number one thing that young candidates ask me when reaching out is how do they control the dynamic with their boss? What type of relationship should they be looking for with their boss? What are some tips to manage a tough boss or a tough environment with your boss? So, I thought I would talk a little bit about in this video the frame with your boss that you must hold, and hopefully, guys, this will give you some bit of help, a bit of extra advice and guidance when starting your next job or even being able to see how things are in your current situation. Okay, so first things first is something that I always think about. They're not your friend, so don't take it personal. Okay, this ties in with my second point, but you need to understand very, very early on your boss, okay, is a colleague, not your friend. Okay, so they are going to have bad days, they're going to be stressed, they're going to have their problems in their life. Okay, it is very important that when they tell you off about certain things, do not take it personal. Okay, you need to understand very, very early on. Okay, when there's not a friendship there, it's very hard to take criticism on a personal level. Okay, if they're insulting you or something like that, that's different, of course. Okay, and again, you need to be getting out of there as soon as possible. Okay, but if they're giving you feedback that you don't agree with, or you feel like they're a little bit too harsh on you in the way that they speak to you, you need to just take that step back and remember they're not your friend. Okay, they're not your friend. They haven't known you forever. They don't know your life story. You don't know their life story. You don't know what's going on in their life. They don't know what's going on in your life. Okay, so don't take it on a personal level. Okay, you need to remove all of that emotional aspect to this attachment that you will have with your boss. Okay, I think people think because a lot of the time they see their bosses 8 hours a day, 40 hours a work week, okay? It's very, very easy to get like an extra layer of attachment to the people that you work with. But you guys need to understand, first and foremost, they're your colleagues. Friendships can develop, of course, but first and foremost, they were and they are your colleagues, okay? So it's very important that anything that they tell you in a negative light, don't take it personal. And you know what? Even in a positive light, don't take it personal either, because again, all it's going to allow you to do is drop your guard and emotionally invest more and put more of a pressure on the dynamic of the relationship. When in reality, if you take a step back and you remove yourself from that bubble, you'll see very, very quickly that you shouldn't be taking anything that they say personal, because at the end of the day, they're not your friends. They're not your friends, they're your colleagues, okay? So remember that dynamic first and foremost in anything that you do with your boss moving forward. Secondly, they have their own stresses and expectations. I think this ties along in with my first point in not taking personal what they say, because at the end of the day, they've got their own stresses, okay, in their personal lives, in their work lives, especially in the work environment, guys. Your bosses have the highest expectation, okay, whether they're working for a big company and they're answering to a bigger person, they're answering to potentially even the top dog of the entire company, or if they're the owner themselves and they're investing every bit of money and time into this company to make it work, to provide for their families, to provide for themselves, to provide for their loved ones around them. Okay, they have their own pressures, they have their own expectations. Okay, so a lot of the time, anything they say to you, you need to just take a step back and remember, okay, they're in a much more stressful environment than I probably am. Okay, me making this mistake right now has probably amplified their stresses for the moment. I need to remember this is not personal. Okay, so you need to change that dynamic very, very early on in understanding that whatever they're getting angry at you about, okay, or even if they're just not talking to you, they're giving you a very cold treatment, or you find them in general a very cold personality, okay, just take that step back and just remember they have their own lives, they have their own stresses. Okay, now again, this is not an excuse, all right? So if they are genuinely rude and disrespectful and belittling you and things along these lines, okay, understand it's probably not, again, personal. It may be as time goes by, but regardless, if you don't feel comfortable in this environment altogether, plan your exit. As I always say, plan your exit. Don't leave straight away. Don't leave like acting on impulsive emotions. Just take a step back and slowly but surely plan your exit, okay? But at the end of the day, if you do feel like the actual criticisms are not personal, but you just find them a little bit harsh, you just find it hard to warm up to your boss and things along these lines, but all in all, they are a good person, just take a step back and remember, guys, they have their own stresses and they've got their own expectations that need to be met. So they're going to be naturally stressed. Okay. So try to remove the emotional attachment to these people and understand that you're just working beside them and that's it. Okay? Now, my third and final point is to never speak back. Okay? This is something that a lot of people get wrong. A lot of people think that in order to change the dynamic with their boss, or in order to have a little bit more control in the relationship, is you need to you need to speak back. You need to put your foot down a little bit more. I disagree completely. Okay, reason being is at the end of the day, talking back or pushing back, it may make you feel better in the short term, but they're going to carry that association with you for the rest of your career. Okay, that is going to stick with them permanently. Okay, that you talk back, that you push back, that you can't take on criticism. Okay, you open yourself up to all of these flaws and potential objections for what? For that 30 seconds that that you feel a little bit better about yourself. Don't do it. Okay, again, if they're being like genuinely disrespectful and they're insulting you and your intelligence and things along these lines, I still don't think you should be arguing back. I think, maybe just say like, look, I prefer if you don't speak to me like that, or things along these lines. A little bit more of a subtle confrontation I think is a little bit more acceptable in an extreme situation. But on a daily basis, if you are finding that, you're having those uncomfortable conversations, or they're being a little bit, condescending towards you, or you find that they're just criticizing you a little bit too much, don't feel that pressure to talk back. Okay, at the end of the day, all you need to be doing is just observing and learning. Okay, this is what I did in my first job in particular. There were a lot of times where my boss wasn't happy with either my performance or my colleagues' performances, and just at the end of the day created a lot of unnecessary pressure. Okay, did I argue back with her? Never. Okay, did I feel like she was right in what she was saying? Not really. Myself and the people around me, I felt like we did as best of a job as we could. Okay, but naturally, you're just not going to warm up to certain types of people, and that's fine. Okay, perfectly fine. What I did in that situation though was I took a step back and I observed what I appreciated about this boss and things that I didn't. And what I did from there was I looked at it and I thought, okay, what are the good? What are the bad? Okay, what are the things that when I move on to my next job, I really will value in a boss? And I was able to do that, and it was able to help me with my search for my next job. Okay, so at the end of the day, in that moment, let's say I'm having an issue with my boss, because with my first job, it wasn't like we hated each other, but it just kind of felt like maybe I wasn't the right hire for the company based on my inexperience, because I was very new to the industry. And I think looking back at it, they probably needed someone that was a lot more experienced than me. Okay, now again, that's not my fault, but at the end of the day, I was there. So I had to either adapt or sink. Okay, it was that simple. So at the end of the day, there was conversations where I felt like she was maybe a little bit too harsh on me, or things along these lines. Because again, I didn't feel like I was best prepared for the position. Okay. Regardless though, at the end of the day, there was a lot of good that I took out of that job as well. And I think what I realized is that when you have a boss that, you may not see eye to eye on, or they may have things that, you don't enjoy working under, that helps you then realize what you do want, what you do like, and what's going to help you moving forward. Okay, so it's very, very important, guys, that you take on early on. Okay, if you have a bad dynamic with your boss, you have a bad relationship with your boss, don't sit there and fight back. It does nothing. Okay, you may feel better in that moment, but for what? A lot of candidates that I speak with that have messy exits is because they have constant arguments with their bosses. And I just think, why? Why do that? What do you achieve arguing with your boss? Your pride? At the end of the day, like, if you're being like genuinely personally disrespected, that's different. Okay, I've never been in that position, so I can't like give that specific advice, but I would be able to say, it's just a tip of someone who works in recruitment and works alongside hiring managers, is you probably it's good to like just let them know. I would say to just be like to them, look, I don't appreciate the way that you spoke to me there, or even in that situation, just bite your tongue and move on to HR, or express what just happened to a colleague that you do trust. Okay, but never just push back and just lose control. Okay, because at the end of the day, that 30 seconds of you talking back is going to give you this endless reputation that's going to be very hard for you to shake. Okay, and once they start talking, because again, if they're your boss, they're going to have more power than you in the company. Once they start talking to people around you, you're going to develop a very bad reputation very quickly, and you're not going to be able to change it. And for what? 30 seconds of pushback, it's not worth it. Okay? Take a step back, acknowledge what you like in the boss, acknowledge what you don't like, and acknowledge that when you move on to another company, what is the dynamic that you're looking for? What is the type of environment you are looking for? And that's going to help you with your next screening process anyways. Because they're going to ask you 9 times out of 10, what type of environment do you want to work in? You'll be able to highlight. You'll be able to be very specific there and be like, I'm looking for a boss that will allow me to do A, B, and C. There you go. And that works on that alignment so much better for your next job. So instead of creating that short-term problem, take a step back, absorb the information, observe and learn, and apply that for the next step in your career. Okay? I hope you guys got some value from this video. If you guys enjoyed and you are looking to work with me on a one-to-one level, click the link below for a free consultation. Happy to organize a 30-minute chat. Hope you guys enjoyed this video and you guys got some value from it. Thank you guys again for watching. Take care. I'll see you guys next time.